Hey, it's Nikki, and today's episode is a special series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact with my friends from Borshoff. I am a huge fan of the work Borshoff does to advance internal communication, and so happy that they have joined Gut Plus Science for a special series. Get ready for internal communication inspiration. There's so many nuggets of wisdom here.
Hey, it's Katherine Coble, your host for a very special Gut Plus Science series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact. Our big goal is to help leaders become better communicators, because communication is your best tool for leading well. Let's go ahead and dive into this month's topic. Well, today I'm joined by a leader with a really diverse background. Greg Ballard is an author, a businessman, a politician who has also served as the 48th mayor of Indianapolis, Indiana. He also has a long and very honorable career with the United States Marine Corps. He served 23 years before retiring, followed by some leadership roles in corporate settings, as well as his own consultancy focused on leadership and management. So, given his background and the successes that he's had, it's my pleasure to welcome Greg Ballard to the show and to dive into some of his philosophy and approach to leadership communications. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Great. I am so excited to have this conversation with you because I think there have been some really interesting elements of your career that have probably shaped the way that you communicate and what you think is important when communicating with people that you're leading. And that's really the focus of the show that we do. So I'd love to just start with a little bit of that background and your leadership style. So obviously your military experience has really had a major influence on who you are and how you lead. Tell us a little bit more about that part of your career and what it taught you about leadership.
I was very blessed that when I joined the Marine Corps, which shocked everybody when I did that at the age of 23, right out of IU, no one expected that to happen. But the Marine Corps talks about leadership from day one. I mean, it's just part and parcel of who they are. And they make sure that even at a very young rank, whether it be officer or enlisted, they talk leadership and how important it is. You get used to that after 23 years and you get your own style, obviously, as you go along because you're shaped by other people. I would suggest to you that when I joined the Marine Corps, I was pretty much an empty vessel on all this, frankly. I never even thought about the concept. Then it all of a sudden becomes something that they're talking about all the time. I better figure out what this is. And in the Marine Corps, like a lot of the military, things get simple and they have traits and principles and you learn those things. And frankly, I never thought of those things before, but they made a lot of sense to me as you move along. And they help guide you. So I leaned into that a little bit. But then as you move along and you figure things out and your responsibilities increase and you got more people responsible to you and you have all these people and then you see what the generals are doing and the colonels are doing and you have to look at that. And when I looked at the higher ranking folks who I respected, they all were very similar in lots of ways. They cared about their people. They had a clear focus on what they wanted to do. They made sure not to alienate people, that they brought them along. They were collaborative in their approach. It's kind of funny when I first became the mayor and everybody started saying, oh, it's not like the Marine Corps. You can't just tell people what to do. But the fact is the military is a very collaborative leadership style across the board, across all the services. You have to figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And I'm guessing from a communications perspective, it's also very important to be very clear. Clarity is, I'm guessing, a very important element because life and death decisions are being made, and it's important for everyone to be on the exact same page and to understand what the mission is. So
you listen to everybody, and you listen to the people you trust. But if you have all yes men or women in there, you've got the wrong group, and you've got to have lots of people who will point things out to you that maybe you hadn't thought of, and that's extremely important. I give you one real world example that had enormous real world consequences. I was in the Gulf War back in 1991, and the general in charge of the Marine forces over there, General Boomer, 3-star general, had to decide. Now, think about the weight of this decision. He had to decide whether to clear one breach or two breaches through those minefields and concertina wire that Saddam Hussein put up. So he was really torn by this, and it was pretty clear he was really torn by this, because if you put one in and you get stuck, then the whole forces are stuck. If you put two in, then maybe they're stuck, but you might be dividing your forces too much to be effective. So it was an absolutely critical decision, and he did not make that decision himself. He walked around and talked to all of the subordinate commanders and got their thoughts, their opinions on how to do that. Those are life and death decisions for lots of folks. But that's how the Marines and most of the military does these things. They're very collaborative. Let's try to figure this out. However, that said, once everybody's in the room, or however you want to say this, but once the commander makes the call, then you go out and execute, and everybody's on the same team at that point in time. Because if you don't do that, then things really fall apart.
Right. And I think that kind of foundation that you had in the military, it's really interesting, because I think it shows some leadership principles that actually translate across environments, not just for the military, but even in business and in politics and even in a nonprofit situation. Let's kind of pull on that thread a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about 2007. You decided to run for mayor in the city of Indianapolis, and we're not really here to focus on the politics of that race, but I am curious, what did you hope to accomplish from that bid from a leadership and a communication perspective?
Most people know I was not a really good communicator going into this. I mean, for the political world, if you will, and they do it differently than the Marine Corps, obviously. I had given speeches. As you go up, you give speeches, but it's a whole different thing. And there's a whole different expectation on all of this. And frankly, I wasn't very good at it at the beginning, and I had to learn how to do that. But on the campaign, so you have to understand, we didn't have a big campaign. I mean, we had, my campaign manager and one part-time college student. That was kind of it. Everybody else has all this and this and this. I didn't have any of that. So we had to figure it out on the run, but you learn how to listen. I mean, a big part of being in office, and I think a big part of leadership all the time, is listening well. And I think I've got that gift. I listen really well. I know when to just keep my mouth shut. And there's a dictum in the military also that, say you have 9 hours to plan before execution. Well, you get 3 of those hours, and your subordinates get 6 of those hours. They get 2/3 of those hours. You don't fill up that limits of time with your stuff. You let them have it. And so part of that is listening. It's kind of funny. What I started talking about at the end of the campaign is what I heard in the neighborhood groups. I went to those organizations and I didn't talk, I listened. And at the end of that campaign, that's what I was saying. This is what the people want here in the city of Indianapolis. I just said in different language exactly what I had heard in those neighborhood groups. So listening was a big part of my leadership, always has been.
I love that. I think that's so important. And it's a philosophy I've always tried to instill in our clients and leaders that I work with over the years. I'm curious, in addition to just the listening, you alluded to the idea that in that race, you didn't spend a lot of money. You didn't run a lot of ads and things like that. You got out and you did a lot of listening. What else, did you combine with that to really get across what your vision was?
I didn't have a lot of options. When you have no money in campaigns, you don't have a lot of options. But we did get out quite a bit. I prepared heavily for the debates when we did those. So I had to up my game, to be frank with you. My game was fine with what I was doing in the service and what I did shortly thereafter, but it was not fine for the arena I was about to go into. And I really had to go up that game. So, and I think I did that pretty well. It's weird when you're talking to the citizens, but also you're talking to a camera 10 feet in front of you. And talking like we can hear because we can see each other is a lot different than talking to a camera that has thousands of people watching it. It's a little weird, and you got to get used to that sort of thing. You got to get over it and figure that out. And then when you have to talk in front of people, you've got to, there's a certain way you have to do it. You got to stand up. You got to be forthright. You have to be honest. You have to do all those things. You have to be sincere. There's an old TV show that he said you got to be able to fake sincerity really well, but I can't do that. I'm either sincere or I'm not, and so I choose the former. I am sincere when I talk, and it worked for me. It just worked for me. It really did.
Well, I think that authenticity is definitely a big part of having influence with people. What else did that campaign experience teach you about motivating people, especially people that you didn't necessarily have any formal authority with at that point?
That's a big part of this, is being able to influence people that you don't have authority. That's an excellent point that a lot of people don't get, but I was able to do that because you're trying to influence people to vote for you. And unless you present yourself in a certain way, unless you believe in what you're saying and what you're trying to do, and and you have to be heartfelt about that, then none of that is going to work in the political world. So, and I think that plays out in all other arenas also. I really do. I wrote a small leadership book back in 2005, updated after I got out of office in 2016. But part of it is just being who you are, knowing who you are, and being able to communicate and influence. I think leadership is primarily influence, and you bring all your skill sets into this to try and influence people in a certain way. But you have to put all those other pieces in there, like I talked about, listening well, collaborating, making sure people feel part of the team and all those other things. But then once you go, you have to influence people to get there. And I think we were able to do that at that time. And I think I did that pretty successfully in office too.
Yeah. So moving from this grassroots effort, the campaign, you win. You are now taking over leadership of a major metropolitan city. And that's a pretty massive shift from campaigning to actually governing. So what do you think was the hardest part of that transition as a leader?
Well, early on, it was really obvious to me what was the hardest part. I didn't have any credibility. A lot of people who, in the nature of the campaign, I'm still the nobody. Now I'm in the mayor's office. And Jim Shella, Lake said the accidental mayor, right? So, and I understood all that. And I was old enough to understand where I was and where I was coming from and how people might perceive me. I knew enough to act accordingly. In the first couple of years, I didn't come out and make big pronouncements and all this and this, and we're going to change this. It's just, I didn't have the credibility to do that sort of thing. And I knew that. You got to have credibility. But what I did have is a great team. I had incredible people that came in, and I don't know how I got so lucky, but I did, to have these incredible people come in surrounding me, and they had credibility, and people knew who they were, and people wanted to work with them. My first chief of staff, Paul Okeson, is a tremendous individual, well-known in certain circles, and certainly in the political world. I couldn't have had a better first chief of staff who guided me. And I remember I won't tell you what the subject was, but I said, while this is working over here, okay, we'll just do this. And Paul looks at me and goes, Mayor, that is 100% wrong.
Oh,
And so when I hear that sort of thing, I know I've got the right guy next to me. He can tell me that. And I want to hear those things. And he said, that's 100% wrong. And we did not do what I originally wanted to do at all. We went down a different road. So I was lucky that I had those people around me early on, but I also picked up things pretty quickly. I'm lucky that I can do that sort of thing, but I just had the best people around me, which really helped me quite a bit. So my style didn't necessarily change, but now their responsibility is much more massive at that point in time. And one thing people always ask me, what did the Marine Corps do for you as the mayor? And frankly, it was focus. What we talked about earlier. Once you make the call, then that's the call, and there you go. So we would collaborate, make the call, and then we would go, and then we all march out together and say, okay, this is the direction we're going in. And because in office, in politics, people are trying to distract you all the time. They're trying to get you off your game, and this nonsense piece over here and this silly thing over here. And we were able to kind of, once we made the call, we went down that road, and we stayed focused on what we were trying to do.
right. I think that discipline is so important to leadership, especially if you're really trying to get something accomplished as opposed to just trying to be liked.
It's funny you say that. That's what worked for me, because even if people disagree with the policy, they knew after a couple of years, they knew that I was doing it for the right reasons. And I always told people, do the right thing for the right reasons. And I think we were doing that. But if you disagree with this particular policy, they knew it was coming from a good place. And so they trusted us to do that. And they knew I wasn't going to throw the city off the edge. I wasn't going to do anything like that. But they also said, this call, okay, he's doing it that way. And that's fine. I was in a fourth or fifth year, people really trusted us. And I could feel it in the city. It was really heartwarming. I never said anything about it, but I could really feel that people really liked what we were doing, that our administration, which I was the furthest thing from a micromanager, as my team would tell you up and down. I was hardly a micromanager. People liked what we were doing. We communicated well. We had the mayor's night out every month for the first 4 years, every other month, second 4 years. But first 4 months, we went out to the neighborhood every month and just listened, took all their questions. And it was very effective. And we governed that way. We governed by what we heard in those neighborhood meetings.
I think that listening characteristic and the consistency that you built over time, you were doing the same things over and over again. And so people could really understand that you were consistent in your approach and they knew what to expect of you. And that's what really builds trust for a leader.
I think it did. They knew who I was. Like I said, I had the best people around me that I could possibly have. And we went out and talked to people. And one of the things I heard a lot was, boy, you guys return phone calls. Well, that's a big statement. That's a big statement. And so we communicated well. People understood what we were trying to do. And to be honest with you, just in this particular world that I was in at the moment, my wife played a big part. And she really did, because they could see her with me. And I think that was very much appreciated. It was just a short, funny story here. The political people, when I got in office, again, I don't have the credibility. I'm almost nobody at that point in time still. And they said, don't do this and don't do this. So I kind of listened to all of it and kind of took it in, and then I had to make it my own because some of it was just silly. But one of the things was, don't take your wife with you. And I said, well, we're empty nesters. My kids were in college at the time. I said, why not? I'm not going to have my wife sit at home. My wife, if she wants to sit at home, I'm okay, but whatever she wants to do is fine with me, and that's what we're going to do. And I said, and I had a rule right at the beginning that it was anything after 5 or on the weekend. If you wanted me, you were going to get her. That's just the way it was going to be. And within the year, if I went to lunch somewhere in the city, people were asking, "Where's Winnie? Where's your wife?" I guess everybody wanted to say. So that became part of it too, right? People really did see us as the team. I think it was an important part of the leadership in the city that people saw us together and they understood us. And plus she's a naturalized citizen, which I think played well in lots of places. But she's just she's just a wonderful woman, and it's a big part of the leadership.
And it's just a part of who you are. And you were able to bring your whole self to that situation. And I think that's important for you to stay true to who you are as a leader. And obviously, you talked about surrounding yourself with really smart people. It's a piece of leadership advice my dad gave me very, very early in my career too, is make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you, because that's what's going to really lead to significant success.
And I did. And I was so blessed. If you knew where all those people were right now in these big jobs that they're doing right now, it's incredible. I did not know anybody that I hired. These people are coming from different places. But everyone I brought in, it was in that December of 2007. I told everyone in the nicest way as I possibly could that if you're doing this for me or you're doing this for the party, then we're not going to get along. If you're doing this for the long-term health of Indianapolis, we're going to get along just fine. And that seemed to bring everybody in, not just the people I interviewed, but other people too. Everybody understood where I was coming from.
Yeah, staying mission focused and being consistent in that, I'm sure, was a big, big help. So I want to talk a little bit again about listening. You talked about that being a really important element of your leadership style. And I just want to dig into that a little bit further. How do you make sure that you really are truly listening and not just hearing, especially in politics? People have very strong opinions. They're trying to distract you. Like you mentioned earlier, you have to create a certain kind of an environment where you can develop a good listening habit and where people recognize that they can actually share important things with you because you're going to consider and potentially act on them.
That's a great question. I'm helped by the fact that I'm naturally curious. So if you're curious, you shouldn't be talking. You should be reading or listening, right? So I think that helps out quite a bit. Plus, I learned a long time ago in the Marine Corps that you don't have all the answers. Lots of other people have better answers than I might have. And it's just my job to vet them and implement them. I didn't have to come up with everything. And we heard lots of things we didn't know. Like at the mayor's night out, we went to the southeast side one time. And, the DPW, Public Works, has this massive list of things to pave and sidewalks and everything else. And we went to the mayor's night out and they said, this road right here hasn't been touched in years. And like the DPW wasn't on the list anywhere. Within the week, that thing was repaved. So that was kind of how we listened, because we went out there to look at it. It really was bad. So that was the sort of thing that I think was very important to us. And I think it permeated throughout the team. My team knew I was like that. And I think they wanted to do that also. They wanted to do what was best for the citizens. And that's what I had to do. And because that's who I am, I don't need to talk all the time. I'm introverted by nature, which is very unusual for a politician. So listening is kind of in my wheelhouse, but people expect the mayor to speak too, right? They're expecting you to speak, and you at some point you have to do that. I ran those meetings, but listening to them, listening to my staff, listening to people outside of the city. Every time people wanted to come into us, and this is one of the unfortunate things about being the mayor is my schedule. The people requesting, it took 6 weeks to get in to see me. Now, before I was the mayor, I never would have thought that sort of thing. That can't be. That's horrible. But that's kind of what it was. That's kind of what it was. That people wanted to come in because I had so many requests to meet, and I had so many responsibilities I had to do. So that time, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day was available to get to me, but you had to be a few weeks out. And I felt bad. There were some exceptions, but that was generally how it was.
I'm guessing that that idea of having a really strong team around you helped some with that situation, in that even if they couldn't get to you, you felt confident that the people on your team could help with some of those issues, answer some of those questions, take into consideration some of the ideas that were coming your way. And it kind of became an extension of you.
We had a scheduling meeting every week, and 60 to 80 requests a week would come in. I can't do anywhere near that. I did what I could, but you're right. I said, can Olsen Williams do this? Can this guy do this? And they're not in the room, by the way, but I'm doling these things out to these folks. And of course they were happy to do them because it made more sense for the public works guy to handle this directly than me or the police chief or somebody to do that. It just made more sense to do that sort of thing. That's what we did, a lot of it. I met with lots of people. I went to lots of events. One Saturday, I went to 15 events. And boy, was that fun. But people want to see the mayor. And part of it is going out there, listening to them and getting them back in your brain. And then going back to the office and talking to the team. And what about this? And I could give you several examples about how just listening led to a much better outcome.
So, to that point and to your team, I wanted to ask you about your role as an internal leader. Obviously, when you become the mayor, you are the mayor for everyone in the city. Your focus is very much on citizens and the needs of the city, the outward facing things. But you also suddenly become the CEO of a very large organization with employees and policies and procedures and departments and so many operational things that happen. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to take on the operational leadership of such a large entity. And did you look at that different from your duties, speaking and working with citizens?
A little bit. The Marine Corps, again, very beneficial because as you move up in rank, you have bigger responsibilities. So, and you learn how to do all those things. In my leadership book, I had some traits and principles like the services do, but I put in realities in there. And the first one is that everybody wants to be on a good team. So, and I give the example, when I used to talk about these things, I said, no coach comes into a team and says, hey, I want to lose. We're going to lose there. You don't want to go to work for somebody and says, I hope that we go bankrupt in 2 years. I mean, no one does that. Everybody goes in expecting to be on a good team and they want the leader to take them there. You want to do it together, but I mean, you're there for a reason. So I kept that in mind, and I talked about this sometimes when I was out of office, that philosophy, but everybody wants to be on a good team. It applied to the city and it applied to my staff. And I looked at it from both angles. And I wanted people to be proud of the city, but I wanted my staff to be proud of this administration. And I think if you talk to almost any of them right now, they'd say exactly that they were proud of it. It was almost like the Luger teams, right? When they were all so proud. The people that are in the administration feel like that about what we did because, like I said, I wasn't a micromanager. They were able to make important decisions and grew in their leadership capabilities also. And I wanted them to be proud of this team. I wanted our staff, our main staff, to really be proud that they were working together. That I held a 9:00 staff meeting every Monday, pretty standard stuff, but I just listened. I just listened to what was going on. And all of that was very important. I think they did look at it like that. I wasn't trying to tell them everything. I wasn't trying to give them my wisdom, which especially early on, I had none. So I just wanted them to be proud of what they were doing. I wanted them to be focused on what's best for the long-term health of the city and move in that direction. And I think generally speaking, they all did that. And it was very important to me. And so I made decisions based on that. And I don't want anybody to leave. I want everybody to be here as long as they can. And it's amazing the people that work in municipalities sometimes, and in state government occasionally. They come in for a few years and then go back to their other life, their private life, if you will, commercial life. And that adds so much to the depth and the context of municipalities because these people are so terrific and they bring their skill sets in. And I had lots of those folks who came in for a few years to work with us. And God, it was so heartwarming. And they added so much to the city. But I wanted them to be proud of it. And I think if you could talk to anybody, they'd tell you exactly that.
So great. What do you think is maybe one mistake that you see leaders making over and over again when it comes to communication and trying to build that team collaboration?
Lots of people start with no, especially in the political world. No is easier. No until you prove it to me. We did just the opposite. We start with yes, as long as it makes sense. It's a whole different mindset. And I can't even begin to tell you how different. The more I'm out of office, the more I realize what a different mindset we had. But start with yes, and then try to figure it out if it makes sense. So many people kind of start with no. And so many leaders say, no, I can rethink that, but no, unless you can prove it to me. Well, then who's motivated then? But I see lots of leaders do that, have that attitude. They might say differently than I just said, but it's there and it's pretty obvious. The other thing is all your ideas don't have to be yours. They don't have to be your idea. You just have to vet them and make sure they work. And we did so much of that. That's why I think we were so broad in our perspective. Let's just try to get all these things done if we can. And I think we're able to do it because they didn't have to come from me. They didn't have to come from my top 2 or 3 people. No, none of that. We saved $1 million on trash rerouting for a guy who had been there for 15 or 20 years. And no one would listen to him that we got to do it this way instead of this way. He went to the public works director. And we did that. We saved $1 million for sure. He'd been there a while. No one's listening to him, but we did. Don't start with no. Start with yes, and try to figure it out.
Yes, and it's always a good thing to say. So before we start to wrap this conversation up, I know that you are currently running for Secretary of State here in the state of Indiana. And without really getting into like the politics and the current issues, I'm just curious, what really continues to motivate you to step back into a leadership role like this? I mean, you've kind of been out of the public eye a little bit for a while, and now you're pursuing this new opportunity. What's the motivation behind that?
I talk to college students a lot, and I tell them, the world is getting better on a massive scale, but we're going through a rough patch right now in our country. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But I lived through the 60s, so that whole thing, 68 by itself was a terrible year in American history. But it's not good. And right now, people in their 20s and 30s have never seen the country work the right way. So what I'm worried about is when they're in their 50s and 60s and running things, they haven't seen this work. When Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill might have disagreed, but they went and had dinner and drinks afterwards, which never happens now. They've never seen this sort of thing. And it bothers me a lot. And I tell them, I said, we're going to get out of this, but you got to work at it. So you got to participate. You got to be part of it. You just can't let it go because it doesn't fix itself. You got to help fix it. And then I started thinking to myself, well, I'm still around. I've had a physical recently. I'm still extremely curious. And people were asking me, they were always asking me to run for office still, for different offices, lots of them. And none of them felt right. But when this opportunity presented itself, it felt right. Like this is my opportunity to change that dynamic. And for all sorts of reasons, the Secretary of State's race matters. It's top of the ticket this time. It matters on how politics in Indiana can move forward in the future if we do the right things here. And so what I would call the toxic partisanship of the far right and the far left, the people who seem to be controlling things, unfortunately, a very small percentage, then maybe this is a way to break that up and get back to rational, practical, moderate government, which the country, with some exceptions, the country has thrived with for 250 years. And it would seem to me, I'm talking to these college students saying this, and I'm thinking I'm doing this, and maybe this looks like the place to start changing that dynamic here in Indiana. And that's really what it was. And that's all it was. It just made sense to me. I'm a little bit older now, but if I can help change this dynamic, and I'm optimistic. I'm not worried over the long haul, but I am worried in the medium term that the young adults have never seen this thing work properly. And if I can help with that, and this seems to be the race to do that, if I can help with that, then I should do that.
It's great. So I'll leave you with one final question. When people think about your leadership, what do you hope that they would say about you?
That he always did the right thing for the right reasons. That's what I want them to think about me. He was sincere. He was honest. He was trying to help everybody as much as he possibly could, because that's really what I try to do, and I've always tried to do it. If I'm doing anything else, frankly, I can't sleep at night. I mean that literally. I can't sleep at night because for some reason I just move in that direction, and I'm hoping that if it helps other people realize that they can do that too, then even better. But I want them to think I did the right thing for the right reasons.
And on that note, we will end. But thank you, Mayor Ballard, so much for this conversation. Really appreciate your time and your perspectives on leadership and on communication. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of In the Loop. As always, just please remember, great leadership really does start with clear, consistent, and intentional communication that's focused on the people that you're leading. Thanks for listening.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.